Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. The best of 2018. I absolutely love this podcast. It is so fun to look back at these incredible guests that I feel so blessed and grateful to have had the chance to interview, to talk to get to know. Really, we've had 25 incredible guests. We've had authors like Patrick Lencioni, Seth Godin, Greg McCune, and Daniel Pink. We've had athletes and coaches like NASCAR champ Jimmy Johnson and Hall of Fame pitcher and longtime client and friend John Smoltz, and college football coaches like Dabo Swinney and Gus Malzahn, business leaders like Southwest Airlines Ginger Hartage, Netflix Patty McCord, and Zappos Jen Lim. You can find all of these podcasts on mollyfletcher.com or by subscribing to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher on your favorite podcast app. By the way, while you're there, if you get a minute, I'll ask you a favor. Please leave a rating or review. It helps others discover the show. All right, let's get right into it. The best of 2018 podcast highlighting your favorite episodes and my favorite takeaways of the year. Let's start with Dabo Swinney. No surprise, Clemson's football coach Dabo Swinney has his team back in the college football playoffs, competing for another championship this year. I talked to Dabo before the season started and was blown away with the type of leader he is. This was our most downloaded podcast episode of the year, Dabo Swinney on leading from the heart. Here is one of my favorite takeaways from that conversation. He talked about serve their heart, not their talent.
Serve their heart, not their talent. We've got to love these guys, and to serve someone's heart, you got to have a relationship with them. You know, you got to be connected to them.
Sure.
And if you're serving their talent, then that means that that relationship's just based on that talent, or your decision making is just based on that talent. Serve and love and care for the people that I'm trying to lead.
Here's another one of my favorites. Bloom where you're planted, Dabo says.
You got to bloom where you're planted. Just be great where you are. And so go back to Alabama as a player. I'm gonna be the best scout team wide out they've had here. Man, I'm gonna bring it every day. I'm gonna bloom right where I'm planted. That was my mindset. People are paying attention, and so out of the blue, Woody calls me over. I didn't even think he knew my name, and that tell me he's gonna play me. And then fast forward to back to '08. Hey, my focus was being the best receiver coach in America, being great where I was, and I just turned down the year before in '07 the opportunity to go join Coach Saban at Alabama. It was bad timing for me, and I was like, you know what? God called me here. I'm just going to continue to be great here. And the next thing I know, a year later, I'm in this situation. So I go in this AD's office, and he sits me down, and he says, Dabo, he said, I just want you to know something. I've watched you for 5.5 years. He goes, and son, you're ready for this job. And he said, and I want you to know, here's what I want you to do for the next 7 weeks. I don't want you to be the interim head coach. I want you to be the head coach. And that's such a reinforcement to what I was saying, man. Just be great where you are. People are so caught up in the, climbing the ladder or this next step or this job, they forget, let's just be great right here.
Let failure define you, not develop you. I love this.
Failure doesn't have to define you. And that's what happens. A lot of people, when they have failure or adversity in life, it either destroys them or defines them. And with God, He'll use that failure to develop you.
If you like the conversation with Dabo, then you may also enjoy some of the other coaches that I've had on the show, like UConn women's basketball coach Gino Auriemma and Michigan State basketball coach Tom Izzo, and of course Auburn's football coach Gus Malzahn. Let's stay on the topic of teams for a minute. In his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Patrick Lencioni outlines the 5 dysfunctions that inhibit teams from reaching their full potential. He talks about number 1, the absence of vulnerability-based trust. Number 2, the fear of conflict. Number 3, lack of commitment. Number 4, avoidance of accountability. And number 5, inattention to results. Here's Patrick on the important difference between commitment and consensus.
What you want is commitment, which is everybody to walk out of the room and go, okay, I'm in. I'm going to support this. And what you don't want is for people to hold back their disagreements and then later on have it come out when they didn't really get behind something. But that doesn't mean they have to agree. Intel, the computer chip manufacturer, used to have a saying and a philosophy, and I think they've let go of it a little bit, which is not a good thing, but it was disagree and commit. Most human beings can support something they didn't agree with as long as it's not unethical or immoral.
Sure.
As long as they know they were heard and they understand why that ultimate decision was made. So commitment requires conflict. Conflict requires trust. See, they totally build on one another. And if you take one of them out, the whole thing falls.
You can find the full episode titled Patrick Lencioni on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Another one of my favorite episodes was with author Daniel Coyle. He's written some incredible books like The Talent Code and most recently, The Culture Code. So on this episode, Daniel and I dug into the secrets of highly successful teams. In our conversation, Daniel shared a great piece of advice about how to give effective feedback that I think all leaders listening can apply. Here's Dan talking about, quote, magical feedback.
We tend to think that we have this choice. Like, we can either be nice or we can be excellent, right? Like, we can either be nice or we can be tough. We've got to make that choice. I'm going to be the nice person, or am I going to be the tough one who gives some, really sets the bar high? And what all of these places showed me over and over again is that that's a false choice. You can be both.
Yep.
And they actually strengthen each other. They actually strengthen each other. You can give vivid feedback. And this isn't just sort of anecdotal. There's this really cool study that Stanford did where they looked at what good feedback was made of. And they gave everybody a task and they gave them all these different kinds of feedback. And there was one type of feedback that worked so much better than all the others that the researchers called it magical feedback, which is kind of a crazy thing for scientists to say, like it's magical, but it worked. Right. It kind of worked like magic. And the feedback was this. What they said in the feedback was, I'm giving you this feedback because we have really high standards here, and I am confident that you can reach those standards.
Wow, cool.
That's what inspired the effort. It wasn't like the information in the feedback, like you should add this, not that. The information had nothing to do with it. It was a social cue. It was a belonging. What I would call in the book is it's a belonging cue. It's about you're part of this group. And I care about you, and I think you can do it. And that ends up creating more effort and more excellence than anything.
If you're a leader trying to build a cohesive team and culture, this episode with Daniel Coyle is definitely one you should download. It's called Daniel Coyle on the Secrets of Highly Successful Teams. So speaking of tactical advice, my conversation with Juliet Funt on how to reclaim white space helped me think about productivity a little bit differently. Here's Juliet Funt talking about the 4 thieves of productivity.
What's really robbing us of white space time? And we studied busyness and we found that there were 33 different things that created busyness for people. And when we distilled them, they came down to 4 main themes. And we call those themes the thieves of productivity. Now, the funny thing about the thieves, though, is that they're all assets that run amok. So when you hear the list, it's sometimes a little bit counterintuitive because they're all positive things, but they become problematic. So the thieves are drive, excellence, information, and activity. And those are all things that you want in an organization, except for when drive becomes overdrive and excellence becomes perfectionism, information becomes information overload, and then activity becomes just frenzy. And so these 4 things, when in their natural state, are great. And as they start to overgrow their pots and morph and become cancerous, then they have a real impact.
Find the full episode titled Juliet Funt on Reclaiming White Space at Work. Next is Patty McCord. She's the former Chief Talent Officer at Netflix, and she helped create the company's famous Culture Deck. Here's Patty talking about a defining moment in Netflix company history that led to the overhaul of their culture.
There was a sort of a defining moment years ago. We had a layoff in the company. Most people don't realize this, at the beginning of the DVD by mail business. It was a very capital intensive business, and we were on borrowed time, borrowed money, and we were going to do an IPO, and it fell through in the year 2001. And so in the fall of 2001, we laid off a third of the company, and we just focused on creating a DVD by mail service and hoping that we could do that before we ran out of money. And it was very close. So we were doing twice as much work with a third as many people, and it was more fun. And so it was. I mean, Rita and I driving to work one day, I'm like, I've never worked this hard in my life or been as excited about getting here. And he said, me too. Let's try and figure out what that is. And that was the beginning. We had written down some stuff about the behaviors we liked in people, or that we wanted in people to work with, like, honesty and courage and all those nice things. But this was really, what is it? It was that people were super focused. The objectives, when you're in survival mode, you kind of know what you have to do and what you don't waste time doing. And we just had that's when we wrote the chapter in the Netflix culture deck called High Performance. And what it meant was not that we had only the A players. We had the people that were really focused on what it is we needed to do at that moment, that were really excited about doing it. And we realized that when we had that right magic combo, the rules were just going to get in the way. I just knew it.
For more insights from Patty, you can check out the episode titled Patty McCord on how Netflix built a culture of freedom and responsibility. One of the most fascinating books I read all year was Daniel Pink's book called When: The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. Here's Daniel on why taking a break is actually a key part of performance.
I really think that the research on breaks is where the research on sleep was maybe 15 years ago. The research on breaks is really powerful, and I had it completely wrong. I mean, this probably better than most people from having worked with athletes, but I had it completely wrong in that my view, even like 3 years ago, was that, all right, I get it. Amateurs take breaks and professionals don't. And that's completely the opposite. It's that amateurs don't take breaks. They're the ones who don't take breaks. Professionals take breaks. That breaks are not a deviation from our performance. They are part of our performance. And so we also know a lot more about breaks in that we know what kinds of breaks are most restorative. So we know that social breaks are better than solo breaks. We know that breaks when you move are better than breaks when you're sedentary. We know that actually that nature, being outside, being able to see trees and grass, et cetera, is incredibly restorative. We know that we need to be fully detached rather than semi-detached. And so for me, circling back to your question about how this has changed what I do, I now every day in the afternoon make a break list where I write down 2 breaks I'm going to take. I write down what time I'm going to take it, and I write down what I'm going to do. And so I have fully integrated breaks into my life, and it's made a big difference.
Get the full episode, Daniel Pink, on the science of perfect timing. Ryan Holiday is another author who gives really interesting perspective. My favorite book of Ryan's is called The Obstacle is the Way. Here's Ryan talking about how to focus on the things that we can control.
Often what happens is we focus on what we don't control, right? Other people's opinions, very specific outcomes. What we forget we control is what we are going to do. We control our reactions, our thoughts, our emotions. We also control the ability to change directions if we're heading towards a wall or a dead end. When Marcus Aurelius, who sort of coins this idea of the obstacle is the way, is talking about it, he's saying that the beauty of it is that you can be stopped here, but you can decide that actually you don't want to go here anymore. You want to go over there instead. Mm-hmm. And so really it's impossible. A mind that's always trying to move forward is impossible to stop because it can go to the side and then go forward, or it can go backward and then go forwards, or it can change its orientation by just a degree. And so ultimately we have the power to sort of reorient and change our direction. And that prevents us, I think, from being stymied or stopped.
Listen to the full episode called Ryan Holiday on how to turn obstacles into advantages. If you enjoy the episode with Ryan Holiday, you will also love my conversation with Joshua Medcalf. He's the author of 5 books, including the bestseller, Chop Wood, Carry Water. In this clip, Joshua shares why he's replaced the term positive thinking with, quote, beneficial and constructive thinking.
We don't actually use the phrase positive self-talk. We believe that there's something better than positive self-talk. If you were on a highway and you had to be tied to another person, thinking about like almost like a, you know, like in a potato sack and the potato sack races, and you get to choose your partner though between a positive thinker and a beneficial and constructive thinker. Do you want to, you know, with semi trucks coming at you 90 miles an hour, do you want a positive thinker, or do you want a beneficial and constructive thinker?
Right. Beneficial and constructive.
Exactly. Most people choose, you know, I've actually never had somebody choose a positive thinker. And so we think that there's something deeper than positive, and that comes down to our leadership as well, that it's not just about, you know, being a positive leader, it's about being a beneficial and constructive leader. And sometimes that's having hard conversations. That's sometimes doing things that are not positive, that are hard and that could be construed even as negative. We need people that are leading in beneficial and constructive ways. And we can just always ask ourselves that question, like, is this the most beneficial thing that I can do? Is this the most beneficial way that I can lead? Is this the most beneficial way that I can talk to myself? Is this the most beneficial way of operating in this moment?
Listen to the full episode titled Joshua Medcalf on how to fall in love with the process of becoming great. Next up is Emily Giffen, who at age 29 quit her job at a prestigious New York City law firm to pursue her dream of writing. Here's Emily explaining how she ended up leaving New York just days after September 11 to move to London to pursue writing, and how it ultimately ended up inspiring her first book, Something Borrowed, a New York Times bestseller and a major movie.
There's a sense of like abandoning your city and your country and like leaving it, which is, you know, irrational thing to feel, because what was I going to do? Like, you know, practically speaking. But once I got to London, and I spent maybe like 3 or 4 days just wandering around the city of London. And I remember going to the U.S. Embassy, and there was this book signed up of condolences and just flowers piled up. And it's very healing to be, in a way, in a foreign country, to see the support of the rest of the world for our country. But it was also devastating time to leave. It was just odd.
Sure.
But once I kind of got through those initial weeks, I thought, okay, this is the perfect time to write a book, to really like get lost in fiction. And I started the book then, which was Something Borrowed.
To keep listening to Emily's story, download the episode Emily Giffen on Living the Life You Want. We heard from Clemson coach Dabo Swinney earlier in the show. Now we're going to hear from Herm Edwards, former NFL player, ESPN analyst, and current head football coach at Arizona State University. I talked to Herm shortly before he began his first season as the Sun Devils head coach. Here's Herm on the difference between interested and committed.
There are some struggles when you're trying to compete to win something or trying to achieve a goal. And this is where the two type of people that you get involved with is very, very important, and knowing the distinction between the two. There's people that are interested and there's people that are committed. Most people are interested because they want to weigh the odds so they can continue to be interested. And when it doesn't go in their favor, they basically walk away from it and get interested in something else. Well, I told players, if you're an interested player, this is probably not the place for you. You need to be committed. See, because commitment it's like your faith. You walk by faith, not by sight. And there's a commitment to saying that I'm going to stay in this because I'm willing to give up whatever I got to give up. And when the hard times hit and other people are committed just like you, that's the strength. That's where you gain your strength.
Herm had me ready to suit up and run through a wall for him. Scary thought. What a great motivator, though, by the way. Listen to the full episode titled Herm Edwards on You Play to Win the Game. Keeping with the sports theme, I had a chance to catch up with one of my favorite longtime clients, Hall of Fame baseball pitcher John Smoltz. Here's John on what baseball taught him about resilience.
I always viewed it as, okay, I'm in a hole. How do I dig out? I love digging out of the hole. I love rallying. I used to have a rally cry. Mm-hmm. But as far as life applicable principles, these are all the same. You force yourself to say, okay, I was in this moment. This is what I felt like. The next time I'm in that moment, I shouldn't feel this way. I should learn from it. And each moment becomes a teaching opportunity for you to be better. Otherwise, it'll just cripple you. And every time that moment comes, you crawl back into that hole and you allow yourself to be the victim. And, or, everyone's against me, or you can find enough reasons to find or to validate your feelings on why things aren't going the way they should. And no one's going to feel sorry for you, especially in the business world and especially in sports. So I used to tell my kids, and they used to get tired of hearing it, but it's a big motto that I live by, is the fact that there's one vowel change between the words, but bitter and better. It's one vowel, I and E. And I choose to be better rather than bitter. And a lot of people want to stay bitter because it's an easier place to be, and they gain comfort in that in a strange way where they become stagnant. They don't move from it. And by being better, you choosing that whatever scenario you're in, you're going to make a better opportunity for yourself, and instead of allowing the circumstances to define you.
Listen to the full conversation on the episode titled John Smoltz on getting out of your comfort zone. And if you liked my conversation with John, then you may also enjoy some of the other athletes we've had on the show, like Atlanta Braves teammates Chipper Jones and Tom Glavine, NASCAR champion Jimmy Johnson, and golfer Billy Horschel. Seth Godin is one of my all-time favorite authors. So when his newest book, This Is Marketing, came out last month, I was thrilled to have him join the podcast.
It's very tempting to believe that we're doing work for everyone, but I've never met a marketer who's doing work for everyone. If you're successful, you're doing work for someone, a very specific set of someone's. And so we begin by understanding that you have to have at least a little bit in mind about who you're seeking to change.
For more from Seth, download the full episode, Seth Godin, on the 3 questions every marketer should ask. Jen Lim is the CEO and Chief Happiness Officer of Delivering Happiness, a company that she co-created with Zappos CEO, Tony Hsieh. During our conversation, Jen shared a cool exercise that you can do as an individual or inside your organization called the Happiness Heartbeat. Here's Jen's explanation.
Imagine, heartbeats on a monitor, being able to essentially identify the moments in your life, the highs and lows, and just plot them out, with the axes of time and the levels of happiness. And with every one of those points, asking really simple questions like, what values were there or not there? What people were there or not there? And you start answering these questions, it actually starts informing what you as an individual can actually define as sustainable happiness. Because being able to appreciate those highs is so important, but understanding those lows. And for me, as I mentioned, it was getting laid off, it was dad getting sick, losing him. And asking those questions made me realize, there's a lot of stuff that I was doing at that time that didn't really matter at all. And being able to really just distill it to what mattered the most in those highs and lows. And basically that really helps define that sustainable happiness and sense of purpose. So what's interesting about this heartbeat exercise, this happiness heartbeat exercise, is that it not only applies to individuals, it applies to companies too. So that's why we walk our clients through it, because if you map the highs and lows of the company, what happened when you had super low retention, or what happened when you had a terrible year of sales, and things like that, and you start asking the same questions about values, about people, then you can start getting those answers, the root of it, as to what needs to be done differently and what can be celebrated.
Get more on the science of happiness in the episode titled Jen Lim on delivering happiness at work. I want to end today's episode with a clip from my conversation with Bob Goff, the author of Love Does and Everybody Always. In it, Bob encourages us to reach out when we see someone going through something, because often, he says, it's not the mistake that destroys people, it's the inability to bounce back. That's when they need our love and support to push through. Here's how Bob describes it.
We all mess up, and it's bound to happen. I want to be like rushing towards people when they mess up. What if you just take the news for a week and find somebody who's messed up, and then reach out to them? You're not going to hear back from them because they're engulfed in their big mess up right now, but it'll actually mean a lot to them. And it'll actually start changing you, because you'll feel like you've got some skin in that game, not just empathetic, or find some people that you want to engage, but engage people without an agenda. This whole idea when love has an agenda, like it isn't love anymore. We can all see through that right away.
What an awesome message. Listen to my full conversation with Bob on the episode titled Bob Goff on the transformative power of love. Thanks for tuning in to our best of 2018 episode and for listening to the show throughout the year. I hope you enjoy the conversations as much as I do. I have to say I pinch myself as I look back at all these inspiring guests we've had on this year, who have taken time out of their busy schedules and lives to share their stories and their wisdom with us. If you have suggestions on guests you'd like to see featured or want to share your favorite takeaways, email me at molly@mollyfletcher.com. We'll be back in January with new episodes featuring guests like Shark Tank's Damon John, endurance swimmer Diana Nyad, and productivity and leadership expert Michael Hyatt. I can't wait to share these and more with you. Wishing you and yours a happy new year. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.